Welcome to another episode of Living Your Spark Second Half. Today's guest is Donna Ferris, and I am having Donna back. She was on in May of 2022, episode 220. So check it out. Her whole backstory is on that episode. I'll put a link in the show notes, but you definitely want to hear her backstory before this episode because we reference it a little bit, but I don't want to go into it because it's a lot. Her backstory is a lot. Her life when she got to middle age changed and just highlight found out her husband was cheating, started going through a divorce. She met somebody, fell in love, whirlwind romance, and then he got sick and he died. Heartbreaking, heartbreaking. And then she found love again. So it's an incredible story. When I first interviewed her, I think the book had recently come out, and she sent it to me, and I read it, and it was amazing. So when I saw that she had just published another book, I wanted to talk to her. And so that's what this conversation is about. Her book that she just published is called Bounce Back Stronger. And so it's a updated version of her life. It's not a memoir type of book. It's more of a workbook. And so I love that she sent me a copy because it's really something that you want to have in your hand to use. And I am really excited to dive into it. I haven't gotten very far, but I got far enough that I understood the format, and we talk about that and some of the things that in my just little bit that I've done with it so far, some of the things that really resonated with me so far. So she's wonderful. She is a yoga teacher. She is also certified in yoga therapy. We talked about that in the first episode that she was on, but she really knows her stuff and she's so soft spoken and wonderful. She's a mom of two daughters, and she is somebody that I could sit and talk to her forever. And we did go long. So for that reason, I'm cutting this intro short now and we'll hop right into the episode. So enjoy my second round with Donna Ferris. I love having guests who I've had before because I feel like there's a comfort level having talked to you before. So this is Donna Ferris. Hi, Donna.
Hi, so good to be with you.
You're so soft spoken. I feel like when I get on these things, I'm like sometimes, and you just start talking. I'm like, oh, I kind of melt into my chair.
That's good. I hope I don't put people to sleep though. That's
That's
not
your
good.
yoga therapy training, I'm sure. I asked Donna, I reached out. First of all, one thing I want to tell you, and I didn't want to tell you this before we hit record, I want to tell you it so you'd have the reaction live. You were one of the few people that I stay on the newsletter for.
Oh,
I love reading your newsletter because it's always you and it's interesting. You share what books you're reading. I think I've actually even read a book that you've recommended.
oh,
Can't
good.
remember which one it was, but yeah, I love, maybe because I met you too, but I just get the sense of your personality
Mm,
and your authenticity in your newsletters. And that's
thank
what I
you.
want to be like in my newsletters. So
You are. I
there's,
love your newsletters too, and I stay on them.
well, I get ideas from people like you, but there's only about, I could count on one hand how many newsletters that I stick with. And so, anyways,
Well, that means
yeah,
a lot, just so you know, that
yeah.
means a lot because it's like you throw it out in the world and you just kind of hope it's okay. You don't really know. And I do get some responses, but you don't get a ton. But you don't get a lot of unsubscribes either. But it's really nice. Thank
And
you.
that's
It
that's
helps a
telling. I
lot.
think a lot of people don't. I get replies if something really resonates with somebody, but generally speaking, I get a lot of clicks because I share things that I've
Yeah.
bought on Amazon, for instance. Like one of the big clicks this past month was the mascara that I got because I'm so excited about my mascara.
Yes.
So
Everybody wants
it's
that. That's a good idea.
totally
Yeah.
irrelevant half the time. But if you're offering value and you're going to probably have people stay. And I find value in
Yeah.
you. All right. So the
Aw.
reason I had you back was because I saw that you had a new book. And your first book was so, oh my gosh, loved it so much. And what's interesting is when I reached out and I said, well, is there an audio version? And because I listen to books more these days. And you said it's really a book that you need to have in your hand. And so you wanted to send it to me, which I appreciate. Thank you. And so I sat down with
Absolutely.
it and full disclosure, I've had a lot of time to spend on it, but I love the format. It's more like a workbook
Oh,
type
good.
of therapy book. I love it. I'm sure you have stories
It is.
throughout, but what I wanted to first ask you is what prompted you to do this and gave you the idea for this format? And maybe you
It's
want to
fun.
talk too about what the format is, touch on it.
Yeah, sure. So it it started like every other book that the other book I've written and everything I ever write, it's always in text. And I knew that I wanted to add meditations at the end, like guided meditations for everybody. Because meditation, and I won't, some people I can tell, some people probably are like their eyes are like going over, but it was important, I thought. So I wanted to have that. So I always knew that it was gonna be text and that. And then I did a retreat last October, so it's been a year ago. And just as a lark, I put out this tablecloth for Thanksgiving. I got it at AC Moore and or Michael's. It was Michael's. And I was like, they're going to think I'm silly, but maybe one of the great ways to recover is to do something creative. And coloring's so great because it doesn't have a lot of people want you to color within the lines, but whatever. But other than that, there's just not a lot of rules. And it takes you back to being a kid. And those ladies loved that coloring tablecloth. They wouldn't leave it. They spent
Aw.
the whole time, they put their names on it. And I was
So
like,
it
okay,
was
I've
one
got a,
tablecloth and they had
I'd
their
already
little
was,
section that they wrote on.
yeah,
Love
yeah. And
that.
they loved it. And so that was like, okay, well, I think I was going to do affirmations anyway at the end of every chapter. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to create a coloring page for the affirmations. So that's one of the things. So each chapter has an affirmation coloring page that you can color. And I can show it to you. You can see it probably a little bit here. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
should have
so
held
like
it
I
up.
am enough. There you go. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you can
Yeah.
kind of see it
Yeah.
there. So every chapter has that. And then as I started to go through, I was like, wait a minute, there's other things that have always helped me in my recovery through grief and loss. And so things like, going out and seeing a sunrise and a sunset. Or for me, I'm a big crystals and colors and chakra person. So I did a whole section of that after every chapter. So it just kept building on the little tools that I enjoyed and I say the whole way through, look, take what works and throw away the rest. This book is not the answer for everybody, but I'm hoping that there's something in there that will help you on your journey. It's what worked for me, and I'm just hopeful that something resonates. So that was the idea is and then I have this wonderful book designer that made it look beautiful. I mean, her name's Amy Janad Placentra, and she's unbelievable. So you have this idea in your head, but working with all these different, really creative people just brings it to fruition. And I'm really thrilled with how it turned out.
Yeah. I feel like, and I just really have done the first two chapters. And the first one is setting up and just touched a little bit on what you went through. I mean, hardly touched it much, but you did a real good job of summarizing the trauma you went through. Her first book
Right.
covers that in great detail. And we talk about that in the first episode. But I love this because, like you said, it has an assortment at the end of every chapter of things. You play with this, don't play with it, read it. If you like it, try it on, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
there's quite a number of them because some things people don't like as much as other things. And I like how you said you didn't use the word woo woo, but like for the crystals,
It
like if
is.
you
That's what I
didn't,
call
let's
it.
move on. But there's nothing more fun than going to a crystal store. And if you go to one and they have the little labels of what they are, and I
Gosh,
just love that.
love
But
it
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it too. And one of the things with going through difficult times is it's really helpful to have something that lifts you every day. And so the thought was if I give them a lot of little things that they can do, sometimes just coloring or going to see a sunrise will just lift you just a little bit. enough that you can have just a little bit of hope. And that can be enough to carry us through the next day. And that's really the idea here is it's little steps because the title is really aspirational and the tagline, so this bounce back stronger, finding peace and purpose no matter what happens, which is really hard. I never want to say that to anybody think that's a layup. I mean, I have bad days and I have to hit many of those tools that I have in the book, but it is possible to find peace despite what's going on. And at least I haven't been able to do it. And I want people to know that I believe they can too. But it's hard. You can get stuck into these difficult times for a very long time. And so you need a variety of tools and a variety of ways to pull yourself out of it. And that's what I'm hoping I'm providing. And that's why I did the podcast too, because I need inspiration too. And I get inspired every interview by somebody who's overcome. And we don't spend a lot of time on the thing that brought them to their knees. We spend a lot of time on how they got back up. And I love
Yeah.
the quote, the quote that I use in the front of this, it's from Ariana Huffington. Fearlessness is not the absence of fear. It's the mastery of fear. It's about getting up one more time than we fall down. That just almost chokes me up every time I think about it and read it. And from
Well, you had to
somebody who
get up a lot of
knows.
times. I'll say
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And we will.
And it doesn't mean you're healed because and
No,
no more trauma, right?
no, no.
You mentioned too that, and I didn't know this, but you went through your daughter coming through to terms
Transitioning.
with her being non-binary. And
Yep,
wow, as a
yep.
mom, that is, yeah, that's really a big life change.
It
So
is.
my sister's daughter is now my nephew, although he transitioned a long, long time ago. And so he was in his early 20s, but he's now 46 or something.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I understand that process because I personally lived it with my
Mhm.
family. I can't imagine that, supporting her. Well, is she they? Is that what you refer to
She's
her?
she's a she now. Yeah,
A she.
she's
Okay.
a she. And
Okay.
I learned a lot,
Yeah.
and about myself. And I don't think if I hadn't gone through the things that I talked through in my first book, the losses and the divorce, and really coming to terms with my childhood abuse, I don't think I would have been able to be as good as do as well as I did in this transition time. And I think I did okay. We're still together. She's actually living with me now because she just got done with college. And which is just, all of these are statements that I wasn't sure of that would happen after when we were going through this initially. So yeah,
Yeah, as I
the
recall in your book, and of course, it could have been with the age at the time, but as I recall, your younger one and you were a lot closer than your older one because your older one was a little bit in the kind of going through the first year in college type of thing.
Yeah, my youngest one, we were very close. She was with me through all of the things I went through. So when she went through this time, it was real important for me to be there and I continue to be there for her. And I've learned a lot. It's kind of fun if you think about it. Like she changed her name and I needed to change my name when I got married. So we got to go to Social Security together and change our names and driver's license and change our names. I mean, who says that? Who can say that about their kids? So there's been some really fun things that we did together through this process. So,
One of the things you
um,
said, which I loved, is you said that you're a different mom because before it would have been, how is this impacting me? What does this say about me? It would
absolutely.
have been all about
Yes.
looking through the lens of, oh, it's what she's doing is happening to me versus being, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, let me support you through this. And how is this affecting you? And I thought that was such a great
Yeah.
perspective because we tend to cling
Yeah.
on to how somebody, whatever they're doing and their action or behavior reflects on us. I think that happens in partnerships a lot. And it's
Yeah.
no, you're fine. You just that's them and this is you. And it's how you assimilate it and interpret it and project it and all those things. And you can handle that all differently.
Yeah. And you can pause, right? So you're going to have some of those feelings anyway. We're all going to have that reaction. But like, I learned so much about how to take a moment and when I'm triggered with something to try to step back and not react and just give myself some time to get out of that fight or flight mind that we all kind of get into and then I can react the way I want to react the way that and be the person I want to be. And that's hard because it's not it doesn't just come naturally. I am definitely a person of conditioning, and I wasn't taught that. I wasn't modeled that. So I have to really give myself grace and say, okay, that's a triggering moment. How am I going to react in this moment? I'm going to remember how much I love this person and how much I want them to be happy. And if I can continue to kind of focus on that, I can hopefully make the best decision I can in how I act. But it's hard. I won't ever say it's not.
Yeah. And I think putting yourself in their shoes, no matter not saying, oh, if I were non binary or whatever the situation might be, if you're just saying, how would I want to be treated
That's right.
if I was coming to somebody with this issue or an issue? How would I want to be treated? And I think that holding on to that is important.
Well, and
Uh,
how hard it must be for them to live in a world where they're not feeling that they are who they really are or able to present the way they truly are. I think that's, it's a hard subject for some people, but if they could think about that, I
yeah.
think it would be helpful for the dialogue and the communication about this subject.
Well, it's a
No,
very divisive subject, but it's a common topic these days that you've got to address. I'm sure people, whether it's somebody in your family, it's going to be somebody in your neighborhood.
mhm.
And so you just got to figure out how to be kind of a loving person and not so much take your baggage or your triggers. One question I have, I love to, with it, you were talking about getting triggered. And
Mm.
I'd love for you to share, because I haven't really talked about this. I probably have used the terminology on my podcast before, but I don't think I've ever really gone into, well, what does that feel like? What is that? What is happening to us internally
Mm.
when we get triggered? And what can you describe how that feels?
Yeah, sure. And so I think a good example of this is traffic. I think it's funny. I had a woman named Coach Aruni on 2 podcasts ago, and she's like a well-known yoga person. She's taught at Kripalu, which is one of the top yoga retreat centers in the country for 5 decades. And she says, but I can get behind a car in the Berkshires traffic and lose my mind. And she's like, going to the grocery store. It's going to be open for another 7.5 hours. But I still am frustrated. And it's that 0 to 100 reaction where you're just unable to stop it. It doesn't mean that and I think that's the interesting thing. It can stay in your head. You don't have to let it out. You don't have to physically manifest it. You don't have to say anything, but it's happening in your head. And that's something that can happen to me very easily, especially if there's somebody that is similar to my mother. If there's erratic behavior, some narcissistic behavior, and I won't call her totally a narcissist, but that's the easiest way to drill in for people. It's some of that kind of behavior, and I will react. I get defensive. I'll, dig my heels in. I won't understand why I'm being argumentative, but I am. I also will suddenly feel like I can't do anything right. There's all these little feelings, and they're all related to just somebody that's similar to somebody that in your past has that you struggled with. The things like traffic and so forth, that can be like you're sitting there in your head going, I need to get there faster. I'm going to be a bad person if I don't get there on time. And that's like that's an internal thing that's going on and but your body's reacting to it.
Yeah.
For me, I really notice it like I will start to heat up. So I'll be, even if I'm just having a thought about something that's upsetting me, I will start to get warm and I'll go, okay, what's really happening here? Like I'm actually upset about that. And so it's an interesting thing, but a lot of times your mind goes off, off the track and then your body will show up with something,
Yeah.
whatever it
Yeah.
might be.
Pausing is such a great recommendation because I think when we get triggered, we immediately react verbally. A lot of us who are verbal
Mm-hmm.
people, and we just
Mm-hmm.
tend to react verbal or, we'll text something, which we regret
Mm-hmm.
later. But I think of the time when I think of getting triggered when the whole Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, and there was all that stuff happened with George Floyd. Well, I was married to a police officer for 25
Mm-hmm.
years. And so I heard this news account and this cop had been ambushed and great person and dad of a baby, and there was a discussion I was having in chat with my kids, and of course they're all yes, Black Lives Matter. And here I am. I'm like, do you realize your father was a police officer and I had to sit at
Yeah.
home and worry when he didn't come home. So it's just these little things. And it doesn't have to be because you had a bad parent. It can just be because you lived something and
Yeah.
you're re-experiencing it through a new situation. And I just remember I was like, just take a breath.
Yeah. One of the things I say in the book is if my reaction is hysterical, it's likely historical. So I'm overreacting to a situation. There might be reason to react, but I'm having an outsized reaction.
Yes.
And that's when I know that something's off. If my mental state, if I start to think nasty things about somebody, I'm like, wait a minute. Why am I doing that? I'm stressed about something, or I haven't eaten, or I'm tired. It's one of the things, right? The physical things. But it's likely that I'm upset about something, and it's not the thing that's in front of me that I'm cranky about. It's something else. And so I think those are the kinds of things to note, because a lot of times when we're upset about something big, we'll pick little battles. I call it the St. Elmo's fire. I don't know if you remember that movie,
Oh,
but
yes.
Demi
Loved it.
Moore, yeah, I love that movie. So the Demi Moore character is upset because she has to make a living and she has to leave school and she has to go on with her life and be an adult. And what she spends the whole time doing is doing a lot of cocaine. But she also is really focused on this the funeral of her step monster, she calls her, which is not even happening. The woman's still alive and there's no reason to worry about it. But she spends all of her time spinning around on that thing when she's really upset about the big thing, which is what am I going to do now that I'm an adult and nobody's going to catch me anymore. And so that's kind of what we do. Like if we have these big things going on, we'll pick little battles with things. And then that makes things worse because then we're like all involved in this drama that we didn't really care about. So it's really important that's one of the things I talk about in the book. Don't get distracted. It's much better if you can to sit with what you're going through and take care of yourself and find ways to lift yourself, like we talked about earlier, than to start to spin around or start to drink or do things that are harmful to your body to numb yourself. It's much better to sit with it and just try to work through it because it will go away. Maya Angelou says every storm ends sometime. It's not going to last forever. So you just have to kind of make your way through it.
So does every chapter have a theme of a story and then
It does.
related the
It does.
to-dos and the different tools that you use in the after the story ends at the end? I
Yeah,
think, yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
and it goes through the process. And one of the reasons I felt drawn to write the book is that there's a lot of different ways that they classify going through loss and they tell you how to get through loss. And I found that I didn't resonate with them in the orders that they had put them, and I felt that they were missing things. Like a lot of times they'll talk about you need to recognize that something's happening, but they'll have like three or four steps and then they'll have self-care. And I'm like, no, you need to actually self-care right away. Once you realize you're in something, you need to go directly to self-care, do not pass go, because you need to take care of yourself and sleep and eat properly and do things that lift you and reach out for help and all of those things early. And then you can kind of start to maybe think about what you're going through and maybe learn to accept it and maybe integrate it into your life and all those like mental things. But first, you've got to really take care of yourself. And that was something that was really important to me to kind of get out early in the process. And then the other thing there was two
So
other things that I thought were
when
really
you
important.
say, sorry to
Go ahead.
interrupt, but when you say
No,
they,
please.
are you referring to like experts who
Other books, yeah,
you
other books,
relied on?
and they're
Yeah.
all great books. Don't get me wrong, but for me, it was like this is not working for me. The two other things that I thought were really important that are not addressed typically is that it's really helpful to have creative pursuits or something that makes you forget about time, which is something that Brene Brown actually talks about. It's really important to have that because that lifts us again in a way that is sustaining. And if you talk to a lot of people that have gone through difficult times, they'll write or they'll paint or they'll dance or they'll find something. And actually, I met with a gentleman called Eric Custer recently. He's a entrepreneurial professor at Georgetown. And he says you should have a project. And I agree with that. I think it's really good to have a project that you really care about and you can dive into that will help you get through that time. So I totally agree with that. And I call that purpose. And so it can be creative, but then it should also lead you to your purpose. Because when we go through difficult times, you really learn something about yourself. And a lot of times we come out caring about something really, really deeply. And for me, it was this work, right? This passion project to help people that might be stuck in these difficult times to see light to get out. But many people write about their time, right? I've had several people that have written memoirs about their difficult time, and they write them. The one woman, Mira Talk, she wrote it about her mother had schizophrenia, and she wanted to write her way out of it, but she also wanted to share that experience so that other children of schizophrenics wouldn't feel so alone. And many people feel that way. So finding that purpose really helped her, healed her, and then her mother is no longer a pain for her. Her mother did die, but the pain of that relationship and the death is not weighing on her as much. And I love hearing people find ways to kind of transform that sadness into something helpful for others. It seems to be very healing for people.
Yeah, I also think those creative outlets, at least for me, are very meditative. And
Yeah.
when we're not in our creative space or head, we're just the kind of in the doing head, and it doesn't
Yeah.
allow for ideas to generate. Or
Yeah.
I just feel those inner voices projects, I guess they give you something to do, which is great. But and people say, well, it's mindless, it's a waste of time. But no, you find things, you find meaning in the quiet of those times, is how I
Agreed.
feel. So I think that's why they're so important too.
I agree. I think we live a very transactional life.
Yes.
I do this because I get that. I have to do this because it begets this. So and so expects me to do this. I'm going to do that. Creativity, usually for most of us, because unless are selling it, and even if we are, it's all about, as you said, like tapping into the deepest parts of ourselves. And then you're also alluding to a muse of sorts. You're going to get thoughts and inspiration, and you're going to step outside of what you might actually think is the structure of everything that you're doing, your life, if you're writing a novel, the story, all of that. So that's just transformative. And it's not in any way transactional.
Yeah.
You're not doing it for somebody else necessarily. You're doing it for yourself, and maybe it'll help somebody else, but it's not like it's not a quid pro
Yeah.
quo, I guess is the
Yeah.
word. So,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I think our point here is spend the time. It's very
Yeah, spend
useful
the
to do
time.
that. Yes. That's
Spend the
self-care,
time.
I think.
It
And
is.
yeah.
It is very much that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wrote about this in my last newsletter, is I totally forgot to take care of myself when my mom was dying. It was like the last thing on my mind. And it didn't even occur to me that, oh, this would have made me feel a lot better. But,
Yeah,
and
that
so I get,
podcast, I listened to that. I listened to
yeah.
that podcast. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that and just what
Yeah.
you went through
Mm,
and the self-care, but also how your mother had been stuck for so long
oh,
and how hard that was for you. I think
mm.
that was just really kind of you to tell everybody about that experience. I'm sure many people relate.
Well, I think it's given me just more, it's incentivized me more to prevent that from happening to other people, people who are still alive. Don't let that happen to you, and don't live for somebody else. Live for yourself. And so it's like, what lesson did I learn from that? No matter how painful it was, that was her choice, unfortunately. I'm sorry I couldn't have been enough for her or my sister or any of her grandchildren or great grandchildren, but it's instilled in me more purpose.
And I'm sorry about that. I want to say that I think it's important to just stop for a second and just say, I'm sorry that she wasn't able to be that mom for you. Because I think I have a mother story too, and I think it's just really important to just stop and say that. And I admire you incredibly for realizing that you could do nothing about that. I think that's really important for all of us. And sharing that story with your listeners was such a gift because so many of us try and to, you know, help somebody and you really can't. All you can do is model and love them the best you can, but they're going to make their own choices. And it has
Yeah.
nothing, in many cases, to do with any of us.
Yeah. I think the hardest thing for me too is that she was the best mom.
Yeah.
for so long, and she
Yeah.
was like my best friend, and it's like, and all of a sudden she ditched me.
Yeah, I get it. I don't know if it's helpful at all. I don't think it had anything to do with you.
Right. So I appreciate you acknowledging, how hard that was for me. I think I felt guilty for so long that I wasn't like visiting her every day. And towards the end, I would not go for a couple of months because I couldn't do anything. And I couldn't, I think part of me too is I'm not a nurturer by nature. And so I have to be doing something to help. I
Mm-hmm.
I felt guilty about that for a long time. I need to visit her more. I need to go see her every day. And oh my gosh, that would have really, I think, made me ill if I had to
Hmm.
do
Well,
that. And my
yeah.
life would have been so different had I done that. And I would have been resentful.
Hmm.
It would have taken a lot of my happiness away in life. And I came to terms with she decided this was her path. And so I have to honor that. She's in good hands. She's well taken care of, and she's in a good place in terms of being cared for. But the thing that really changed everything for me is that I had a medium, and this sounds like crazy.
Nope. I believe in it.
If we talk about crystals in your book, we can talk about
No,
medium
I have a
work.
psychic. Nope,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And my dad basically acknowledged that I was doing the right thing and that I did not expect anything out of that conversation. I just wanted my mom to connect with him because I thought it would give
Hmm.
her some sense of closure. And it was such a gift for me. It was such a gift for me. And he actually, which was surprising because you think when these spirits come back that, they're like angels, and angels are so peaceful and sweet and, just loving. And he came back like he was funny, sarcastic. She didn't know who my parents were. And at some point during the thing, she said, "Were your parents married a long time, or is he your biological father?" Like she didn't know any of this stuff. And so it was his personality. At one point, she went, "Oh," and she started laughing. She goes, "He's funny." Oh, it was like so him. And he gave her hell for checking out and not
Mm.
being a part of our lives. It was interesting. It was frank. It was a frank conversation, I
Yeah,
would say. But it's exactly how he would have spoken to
you would
her
have
had
done
he
it.
been here. And so I came away with that because a lot of part of me was like, oh, he would be so mad at me. He was so mad at me. I'm not taking good enough care of the woman he loved. And so we carry a lot of guilt. And it's assumed
Hmm.
guilt that we should be doing something in a certain way. And
Yeah.
it weighs on us and it's unnecessary. We need to
Hmm.
relieve ourselves of that because I think we worry about how we're going to be judged, not just by the people here now, but in the afterlife. So, what would you say to somebody who's living a life where they're making sacrifices that they are in a state of resentment for, or that they feel that they can't live their own purpose because of? What would you say to help somebody like that? Because I see that a lot.
Yeah, I think we all know our own answers. So I think the job when you're coaching somebody in the yoga therapy is to help them find what they already know.
Yes.
And yeah, I really think we already know. And most people already know. So for a lot of the work that I would do is 'cause a lot of it shows up in the body. So you can look at their ailments, you can look at how they're sleeping at night. There's a lot you can tell by like the intake that you do with somebody. And then we'll do some talking, but we'll also do some meditating and yoga. And what I find is a lot of times that will open them up and they'll start to talk about it. Like they need to talk about it and they don't it's all inside and they already know the answer. Like most of the time, I'll get the answer in my first session with somebody. It takes them a while. Like, so what are we going to do about that? What's the steps for that? Because it is caregiving is exhausting. And if they're going through that and they feel that resentment, it's probably showing up in their body. And that's probably the place that we can start to work on.
Yeah.
You know, are you sleeping? So that would be that's typically the first one. Are you getting outside to walk? And like you said, like when you start to do these things for yourself and these creative things too, then you start to find your own answers. And because many times they're not feeling any happiness. They're not giving any happiness to themselves. And guaranteed the person that they love that they might be sacrificing everything for doesn't want it, that would never want that for them.
Exactly. Yep.
And that's probably the most important thing to remind them, I think. And then to give them, I don't want to say permission because we don't give anybody permission, but give them the space to kind of figure out how they can make themselves just a little bit happier. And
Mhm.
that usually leads to more.
Yeah. Yeah. I highlighted something, and it's so funny we should be talking about this on page 7. It really struck me because it's so true. You may even know the right answer now. You just need the confidence to act on them.
That's right.
So
That's right.
true.
It's
Yeah.
incredibly true. Every
Yeah.
time people come in, they know.
Yeah.
They know. We know. We just don't give it to ourselves. And I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure why that is. I think everybody's got their own individual story, but I think that's getting out of our own way I ought to have that stamped to my forehead so that I can see it in every Zoom call, probably reverse so I can see it. Get out of your own way. It's like, seriously, I think we all have that. How am
Yeah.
I blocking myself? The Oracle card that shows up because I pull an Oracle card every day, the one that shows up almost once a week, get out of your own way,
Oh,
you
that's so
know,
funny. Yeah.
because we overthink it. We
Yeah.
overthink everything.
Yeah.
We do that.
Yeah. I
We
actually
do that.
thought about pulling an oracle card before this conversation, but then I forgot. But yeah, I have it tucked away in a drawer in my office and I don't do it enough. But whenever I do it, I'm like, holy crap. That's
Oh,
that's
I know.
that's a message that really resonated with me today. Yeah. So
Yeah.
great. What else did I? Oh, and so the other thing, just to wrap this one up, in terms of confidence, to me, when I hear it with finding the right answers and you need confidence, and I'm curious what you think. To me, it's confidence that to kind of trust the process, that your answers are the right ones, that you'll be okay. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah. And that going on the journey is okay. Like even if you fail in the journey, fail early. And I think that's the other piece, right? We want to be perfect. So we're afraid, what if I do that? What if it goes wrong? Well, what if it does? How else do you learn? But it is hard to do. And I think that that's the big thing. It's like, what will people think? You know, I'm not going to be good enough. You're getting stuck and you need to try. And you're right. It's trusting the process, but it's also trusting that even if you fail at it or it doesn't go exactly the way you planned, what does?
Yeah. Well, it's not
Does.
trusting the process will be perfect. It's
Exactly.
yeah, trusting
Just
the
allowing the
process
process.
will flow and you'll get what you need out of it, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love trust the process though. It's a
Yeah.
good one. It's a real
Yeah, I love this one too. I highlighted this. You can get through this soul crushing moment, even though it feels like 1,000-pound iron weight dragging you through earth. You can even turn it into a triumph that will open your heart to more than you ever imagined. I love that. I always want to say this and better. It's like this and better if you kind of go into it with that. Yeah, I think that's the best way to think is because our mind is so limiting
yeah, yeah.
that we have these boundaries set on what it looks like after the trauma or going forward from the trauma. And we if we just let go of what we think will happen, so much better can happen.
Who knows? Who knows what better could happen? And like when my father died now, I think 4 decades ago, a little less than 4 decades, but close. Somebody gave me the book called How to Survive the Loss of a Love. And I realized, after Mario died, a little bit after Mario died. So it wasn't immediately. It took me months, but I realized that it wasn't enough to survive anymore. I needed to do more than that. I needed to thrive. I needed to do something with this. I couldn't just come back to where I was. I had changed and I wanted a different life, a better life than what I accepted before. And that's what I'm hoping for people, that they get changed by what's happened to them in a way that they will not accept just enough anymore. Because life is too short. And I think that's the thing. Like was the exact same age as I was when he died. So every year I make another year, and it's been 6 years now. I don't want to waste that. I've been given a gift, and I'm obviously meant to stay for forever long I'm supposed to stay. So I want to make it worth it because I owe it to him because he
Mm.
didn't get a chance to do that.
Oh, yeah.
And that means a lot to me. Like his birthday is in July, and every year I mark it, and I make sure that he knows how much I miss him, but also that I'm making it worth it, that I'm still here.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to realize that we only have so many. Life is measured in breaths is one of my favorites, and why don't we have more of them that make us slow down and really enjoy it, as opposed to just kind of, muscling through everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so funny because when I read the very first page of this book and you referenced Mario and that memory you had, and then you said, and the person who has my heart is sitting over there, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought he died, and then but then I reread it and I was like, oh yeah, yeah, this is the person that you're with now, and it was
That's
so
right.
neat once I understood that, and I think that's because if somebody just picked this up, they I don't know. It was just like, oh wow, that's yeah. I love your writing. It's so good. That
Oh,
memory
thank
of
you.
moving the couch, and that was just so
That was a
good.
funny
Such
day.
detail.
Such a
Yeah,
funny day. I still have the couch.
yeah.
I
It
haven't
might
given
be
up
you
the
don't want to
couch.
ever let go of it. I
No, it's
just
going to
let
be
go.
hard.
I just sold our 2003 BMW, which pretty much sat in the driveway. It only had 120, like 8,000 miles on it.
Wow.
But we bought it for my oldest daughter. And before we gave it to her, she had actually two pulmonary embolisms and they almost killed her. We
Oh my
rushed her to the
gosh.
hospital. She got put in ICU and
Oh
she
my
spent her
gosh.
21st birthday in like almost dying. The
Gosh.
night before her birthday is when it happened, or the day before. And that car, it, it's been very much emotional attachment to me. And my husband now, he's not her father, and he just hasn't been able to understand why I can't. I even got the car. It's La Vida, which is like living La Vida. It's like
Yeah.
life. It means life. And yeah, I had a really hard time. Just wanted to hang on to it. And it was like we had a friend and his daughter went to the college near us. And so he was like, hey, can she use that car? And I was like, sure, here, have the car for, oh, do you want this car? Here, have it for a year. And so I would like, it would be a loaner and our kids, both our kids, the oldest one whose car it once was, I just recently loaned it to her a couple of years ago when they needed an extra car. And then my other daughter and her husband used it for like 3 years. So it's like stayed in the family and been
Yeah.
useful, but we have these attachments. And so I would want to hang on to that couch if I were you. Yeah. It means a
Yeah.
lot. It means
Yeah.
something.
It's gonna be a day when I give it up for sure. It's gonna be a
Yeah.
day for me. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that. Like this one woman the woman that did our flowers for our wedding in 2020, and then my husband has been giving me flowers every month since then, and she's been giving them, and she just closed down her business, and she came the other day to give us my last bouquet, and I was just that one got me. She's retiring and she's happy to retire. She's going to spend her retirement with her husband because he just retired, but there was something about it. There was something about that, that separation. I won't see her probably again. We would see her every month, and she was so important to my wedding, which was right in the middle of COVID. You didn't have that many connections then, so it was such an important connection. And just funny how you feel this connection and sadness
Yeah.
around things, and it's a small thing,
Yeah.
really. But
Yeah. Well, and she was a
yeah,
part of that new chapter.
she was. Yeah. Yeah, and she was just a lot, she's, perfect in that role as a florist. She was just really, really good. But I totally give her credit because she's like, I work 7 days a week. I want to be with my husband now he's retired. It's a great modeling for all of us. But it was like, but could you still come every month? It's like,
Yeah.
anyway, so I was a lot sadder than I thought I would be. And again, I think that kind of brings us back to what we were talking about earlier. It's a little bit more than it probably should be what's there. Like maybe I'm just feeling a little bit sad about connections and the things that'll come next. And it's important to kind of look at those things and wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reminded of the phrase, all good things must come to an end. But
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah,
doesn't mean that all good things come to an
yeah.
end. Well,
So I mean,
did I say all good things must come? I
I think
think,
it's
yeah,
right.
all good things because ultimately we die. But
Right. I think that's what it was doing, right? I
yeah,
think it was
yeah,
probably triggering me a little bit around that idea.
mhm, yeah,
When will be my time to
mhm,
stop? And sometimes you think about you're gonna retire or whatever, and it's gonna be, oh, I can't wait. But that moment kind of made me go, that would be hard actually to stop.
mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah. I feel like what the work you do and the work I do, although I actually am in a corporate job right now, which I really like, but I feel like the coaching aspect
mm,
and the podcasts that I do, that stuff, and I'm starting to do retreats,
nice,
and I did my first one last September. But I feel I'm doing my next one in October.
awesome.
But and I'm already planning one next summer, which I'm excited about. But I just see that work continuing, and when I retire, giving my all to it, which I'm super excited about. So yeah, I don't see that stuff ending.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree with that
But I
part.
see the corporate job ending. That's yeah, that would be my retirement, definitely. And then the other thing, we're running late. I mean, I know we've been talking forever, and maybe we have another conversation, but I loved you seem to be a movie buff.
I am.
Yeah, and maybe even a book buff, but I watch things and then I forget. And then I remember them when somebody brings them up, but it's not like they're right there. And so I loved your because you're a Trekkie too, you might remember it
Yes.
even more. But I loved how you talked about neuroplasty
Hmm.
and the way we can rewire. Because as a coach, we learn what neuroplasty is, and that's the ability to rewire these programmed memories if and especially if they're bad, right? We want to find them and rewire them. But I loved your analogy to the guy in Star
Data.
Trek and
Yeah,
how
to
you
data.
talked about just I'll just touch on it. And I didn't even realize they had artificial intelligence on Star Trek. It was this
They did.
artificial intelligence, I guess, robot guy
Yep.
named Data,
Yep.
and he lost one of his closest friends. And because he was a robot, he couldn't feel anything. But he described losing the person as having a well worn path that is no longer accessible. So I thought that was a really good way of describing neuroplasticity of how, and in his case, it was a good memory, right?
Mhm.
A path that of this connection and relationship. But I thought it was a really good perspective because, of course, when I was taught about neuroplasty, I always thought about the bad stuff.
Mhm.
But in your case of losing Mario, which was actually a good thing, yeah, that path is not one you're going to be walking down
That's right.
and rewiring to somebody new. It doesn't mean you're forgetting him, but
No.
he's going to more move to the subconscious most often. So I thought
And
that was really good.
and it's finding, yeah, it is. I mean, I think it sums up loss a lot in that a lot of times what we get caught in loss is the routine of the person, right? And that's where you keep getting pulled back and figuring and realizing that you have to build new pathways. And it doesn't mean and you can hold both. I love Mario still and I love my husband today. I can love them both. There's enough
Yes.
love there and love doesn't die. So that, so those are important things to note that Mario would not have wanted me to stay in the cemetery with him. He would want me to go on, and I can love him And he's still in my life. You mentioned the medium. He still shows up in cardinals. And I had a hummingbird out the other day, and he used to call himself a hummingbird. He's still around and affecting our lives with his love, but I have to move on too. There's a reason that we're all still here, and
Yeah.
there's still stuff to be done and still people to be loved.
Yes.
And that's what we're here to do. So, it's important to know that I think that I like to get that out really early in the book because it's important to know that it's possible and that there's a scientific reason why we can and we will. I mean, do it. It's really a mindset thing. It's all a mindset thing and it's biological. So we can do it.
Yeah.
But you also can die of a broken heart. And what's great about all of these things is it's in your control. I think that's,
Yeah.
you can take ownership of it.
Yeah. Yep. My mom died of a broken heart, but I didn't know that it took 17 years. I thought that it happened really fast. It doesn't happen really fast in many cases. You just suffer. But I don't know. I don't know. That was her path to walk. I don't know.
And you talking about it is going to help a lot of people. Anywho.
I love this. So it's hard to
Oh, I
see.
love that. Yeah.
So I'm holding up this one page that I thought was such a great idea. And when I first looked at it, I was like, is that like paint by number? Because, with paint by number, everything that's a one is yellow and everything that's a two is what. But then I was like, oh my gosh, just to describe it, it's every month. So January is all written is big block letters. February is all big block letters. And it has little segments on each letter. So J has one, two, three, four. A has five, six, seven, eight. So and I love the idea behind it because what the idea behind it does, it keeps you consistent over
Mhm.
time with the new habit of these tools and using these tools in this book. So technically, if
Yeah.
you really did color in each day, and so January has 31 segments on it.
Mhm.
And so on the first day you start, you color in one. On the
That's
second
right.
day, you color in. That is such a fabulous idea. I was like, oh my gosh, this. And I think you said on your website there's a PDF. So
That's
I
right.
have a bigger version of this that you
That's
could.
right. And
Yeah,
if you go to my website, there's a free download of it, PDF
yeah,
download, so you can download it.
yeah.
DonnaYFerris.com. And yeah, I please do. That
Like a tracking sheet, but
yeah,
instead
well
of
that sheet
workouts,
got
you could do workouts too, I guess, with it.
yeah,
But
you could do
yeah,
anything with it. You could do
yeah.
anything so a lot of times so actually that's how I when I got sober, that's what I did. I colored each one of those segments. And so I had this weekly yoga therapy group that I was part of, that my friend Erin Byron, who's also an author and she's amazing, um, ran at the time. And I would just flip up the coloring sheet to show how far I had gone. And I was on the call for the whole year that I was getting sober. And it was really great. And I've used it for other things. I mean, I still use it. Like if I know I have something that I have to wait a year for, I will start coloring. Because again, the coloring is really great because it brings us back to our childhood. It's something that we can do. There's no pressure around it, but it's great to see the progress in color. It's a great thing.
I
So
absolutely
I wanted
such a
to put it in the book.
visual. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Yeah,
that.
love that idea. So I am so appreciative of this. I go to the beach. I go on a beach trip on Friday. And so I'm going
Aw.
to take this and, it'll be a perfect time to dig into it a little bit more and start doing some of the stuff. I'm very excited. And for my retreat, I have a goodie bag, but the crystals are included. And so I'm excited to dig some of my crystals out and start actually using them. And my oracle cards. I need to put them out so I can see them. But thank you so much for uh, agreeing to come on again
Of
and for
course.
sending me this book. That was just so terrific.
I
One
hope
of
it
the things, by the
lightens
way,
your days. You've had a year.
yeah, I'm doing much better. End of May, June was a tough time
I
and it's shocking. I just didn't expect it to be like that.
mhm.
But, anyways, one of the things that you do say, and to wrap it up, I think this would be a good thing to wrap up. But one of the things you say is do something for somebody else, which I love. And you did this for me. And so thank you for that. But I wanted to say too that just to emphasize how important it is to do things for other people and how much it means. The last 2 days, I've gotten two things in the mail totally unexpected. And one was a personally handwritten card
Oh,
from a friend of mine from high school who I never see. And she's got a different life in the other side of the country. And I see her sometimes on Facebook. And not too long ago, I saw her with she was in town, but I live a couple hours from where I grew up. But I go visit and it's not too far. And I saw her and I thought, oh my gosh, she didn't call me. Maybe she just doesn't want, she's just don't like me anymore.
oh,
We make up these things in
oh
our
yeah,
head. And so I just want
absolutely.
to give this as an example. She writes me this heartfelt handwritten note about my mom. She knew my mom because we were in high school together and how she remembered my mom and described how she remembered my mom. And she
Oh,
said, I love following you on social media. You're so just vibrant, or she just said amazing, nice things. And this is just a reminder that do nice things for somebody, when they're unexpected, it's even more beautiful. But also, don't be like me, where you're thinking, oh my gosh, they don't like me, or oh my gosh, I'm left out, or whatever. Don't imagine the worst.
yeah.
I think we just go there. We imagine the worst. Oh, she thought of me and excluded me. No, she
No, exactly.
probably was zoomed into town, didn't have much time, and the people who were there just happened to catch her. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's so funny. And then I got a really nice gift. Going to be in this. I did a webinar for the summit, and I've done a few. It's nothing like I've done it before. And they have been the nicest people to
Oh,
deal with. I've gotten a couple of cards in the mail from them, and I got a gift. I've got a necklace today.
oh my
They
gosh.
sent me a necklace, and it has "Not Your Average Grandma" imprinted,
Oh,
engraved on it.
that's so
It's like,
kind.
oh my gosh. I think when somebody does something nice for you, you just want to pay it forward
That's right.
too. You
That's
just
right.
want to
Eh,
do more for how am I showing up in the world? Do I do that for people? Handwritten notes are also, there is still snail mail.
People
We
love it.
we forget that that exists.
People
It's
love
like,
it. It can be hard in early days to do something for somebody else, but I have to say, like, I think after Mario died, if I hadn't kept teaching yoga, I think that was a big thing for me. Like, that made me get up and then I had to think about them for an hour.
oh
And that was
yeah.
really good for me. That was so good for me. I think it would have been a lot harder for me to get out of the hole if I hadn't had that to do. And I think that, the podcast is really, as I'm sure it is for you, it's really for other people. That's primarily why we're doing it. And that's a great gift too. And just all those different ways that you can find to help other people. I agree. I think it's funny that had this couple on I just did an interview with them, and the husband had a spinal cord injury, and it was about 2.5 years ago, and they had been doing uh, charity and work with veterans for decades. And when he got hurt, they all came running and they all have been helping them. And she makes that point. She says, I didn't do good in my life to get that back. It wasn't transactional at all. It was all about giving because I knew that this was a need. But she says, let me tell you, there's no better gift when you need it than to have people help you. So anyway, I think it just was so heartfelt and just such a good example.
Yeah.
It's real and there's scientific stuff that happens in your body. There's all these different hormones that get the serotonin and all that get stimulated when you do good for others. So there is benefit, but so just, to do it. It's
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah.
But again, there's times where you can't. And so I don't want to make anybody feel bad about that, but it will help you to get outside of yourself. It will help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the book. And I know that whoever buys it, it will be cathartic. It will be a great, I want to say it'll be a great tool. It's a tool in and of itself, but it's got multiple tools to help. And I love that. Are you working on another book?
I am. I have a novel that's about, I actually lost my memory when I was about 35. So it's a novel about that. And then I'm noodling with a book about work, kind of tips to get through using the yoga therapy tools that I have, because they are really helpful in work because it's a lot of the behaviors are unexpected in a work environment. Typically when you step away from a dog eat dog mentality to a I'm going to love you no matter what you do mentality, it does kind of change things. So I want to
Yes.
write about that. There's some tools that I learned, I think, that have helped make the ride a little easier. So I'm hoping that I get a chance to put those on a book too.
Cool.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, just go with a little bit more empathy. That's the message.
yeah.
Be empathetic, especially to yourself.
Thank you so, so much for having me. It's been a great conversation. Time flew.
Yes, it did. I can't believe it. We're over an hour, but that's okay.
It's
And it's
great.
going to be longer because I of my intro. All right.
Wow.
Well, take care.